Hello and welcome to episode number 41 of Behind the Impact. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown, and in this episode, HubSpot's social impact lead, Kaiya Salemy, joins the show. Kaiya, welcome to Behind the Impact.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy.
I have been looking forward to this conversation since you and I first chatted. You happen to work at one of my favorite companies in the entire world, HubSpot. We'll get into that and what you're doing on the impact side of things. But where I want to start first is your career journey and how you actually got into social impact. I feel like your background, number one, is super interesting, and you were at Wayfair at a point in your career, and you weren't always in a CSR impact role and you made that transition. So let's kind of go back in time and give me that career journey.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, I have a pretty interesting career journey, and it's interesting because I love hearing other people in CSR answer that same question because there's like almost no path is the same. Um, so to kind of go all the way back, I have always been a very like sensitive person and feeling feelings really strongly and feeling things that others feel really strongly too, which I think at a point in my life I thought was maybe a negative thing. But I think as I sort of zoom out and look at where am now in my career, I actually think that that's a bit of a superpower and something that's allowed me to really transition into this social impact space. So I went to school for public policy. I had a concentration in healthcare and I had a double minor in social justice studies and economics. So, you know, when I was in school, there wasn't really a social impact track, right? Like that didn't exist. It does now, which is really cool. There's actual like CSR, social innovation tracks, but that wasn't something that existed. So I cobbled together this major and minor that when I look at it now, I'm like, oh, it's like so perfectly aligned with what I do today. Um, but I think what really kind of like kickstarted the my impact journey was I studied abroad in Copenhagen, Denmark, my junior year of college, and I they had a really great healthcare program. So not only was I learning about the policies, but I was actually going into these different clinics and offices and like seeing firsthand, what these policies were able to do for actual clients and real, patients. So I think that that sort of gave me a little bit of the itch of like, how do we actually drive real impact? And when I graduated, I had done kind of a whole slew of things before graduating. I was working with a professor, and we were doing research on. I was an economics minor, so I was a statistics TA, which I really loved, and I was doing research on a project she was doing, which was about the widening wage gap between Black and white women. And so, all of these little pieces that kind of I think brought me to the impact space. But like I said, when I graduated, I didn't really know how to get into that field or that. Honestly, I didn't even know that CSR existed when I graduated. So I took a job at Wayfair where I was managing a portfolio of suppliers. So in the category management space. And I did that for about 4 years. I really enjoyed it. I think it really tapped into like that analytical side of my brain. And I think the other piece that I feel is really consistent across my career is this relationship management, which, I was managing a portfolio of 100 suppliers at some time. And, my favorite part was building relationships with them and then building relationships with the internal stakeholders. And so, you know, I did that for quite some time. Really loved the sort of relationship building and putting together project plans for them. I didn't love the supplier piece so much, and I think I felt that, like, sort of background noise that, like, something was missing, which is what takes me to how I got into the CSR space, if you want me to jump into that right now.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I think like a lot of people, 2020 hit, and I was, like, really candidly, like, struggling with my own mental health, with, what I was sort of doing to contribute at this really challenging time for so many people. And I, in some ways was looking for that like renewed sense of purpose. And so I took on some different like internal things at my job to like kind of help me feel like I was, making that difference at a time. And so I worked at on a task force that was helping promote DEI across the category management department. And that was really interesting, and something that like I'd never really done. I also started getting involved with our Women at Work ERG at Wayfair. So helping plan events virtually and bring that group together. But I think, like, if anything, what that time sort of reminded me and like reassured me was like, I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do that for like my full-time job, right? Like I wanted to invest more in that and than I did in like my actual day job. And so I did a lot of research myself. I started like going on LinkedIn and like talking to people who were in like ERG or DEI roles, and then kind of came into the CSR space to understand like how did they get there and like what did that mean? And it was almost like a light bulb went off for me because I was like, this is quite literally exactly what I want to do and a really good combination of my skill sets. And so I've always been really passionate about like how do businesses have this role to play in making our communities better and being change makers, but I just didn't really know like that that was something that you could do as like an actual role.
And how did you make that transition from at Wayfair from the role that you had when you first joined into CSR? What did that look like? Was it more so you talking to your manager and trying to figure out a way to get into the CSR role? Like how did that happen at Wayfair?
Yeah, I think Wayfair was great in how they promoted that internal mobility, right? And wanting to keep people kind of moving around. And, I'd been there for 4 years at the time. And I think the piece that really kind of made me like stand out for this sort of like impact employee engagement role was that I'd been there for so long, right? I knew the people, I knew how this place worked. And so much of like the actual like social impact piece of it, at least that I found, is like you have to learn by doing, right? So it was a lot of conversations with my manager and then the person who became my manager on the social impact team, and just like getting to know that team. um, I like to say that I was like pretty professionally persistent in my follow up with who became my manager, because I started these conversations with him in June of 2020, and when a role opened up in March of 2021, I was first to apply and ended up getting that internal role. So I think it was a bit of like finding the team that I really felt like I connected with. And then also, like I said, like doing my own research. Like I knew that I wasn't a social impact practitioner at the time. So I was like, how do I give myself those experiences? And I think doing what I had done with the ERG and with the DEI task force definitely helped. But it also was like reading about like I bought books on like corporate social responsibility back in like the day of like when banks were first sort of establishing that, and how they thought about it, and then doing research into what other companies were doing. And I think a lot of that was just taking it on myself to say, yeah, I don't really know this right now, but I really want to learn it, and I am like ready to jump right in.
Hmm. And you mentioned relationship building and how important it was for you. And that's the case for most practitioners in this sector. You got to build relationships with internal stakeholders. Any advice for other leaders, other practitioners that knows that they need to build relationships internally, but maybe they don't know how to go about doing that, especially if they're maybe, for lack of a better phrase, lower on the in the hierarchy and they're trying to build or they want to build relationships with, let's say, executives.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think having been at Wayfair for I was there for 8 years when I left, and so in some ways those relationships were really natural to make because I was so ingrained in the business. So when I left and started at HubSpot, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I have to like start from scratch," right? Um my biggest piece of advice I think is go about it in terms of a listening tour, right? Like when you're trying to build those relationships, it's easy to get in the mindset of like, okay, I need X, so I'm going to go to this person for Y, right? And like that, in my experience, just doesn't work. So what I did is when I started, at HubSpot, I spent like a good 3 months just going on what I called my listening tour. And I met with so many different people who were internal and had some connection to social impact, whether they were, champions and promoting the programs, whether they were, program managers of tangential programs that had social impact elements. And in every one of those conversations, I went in with a really open mind to be like, tell me about what social impact means to you and what you'd like it to look like at HubSpot, right? I think going into relationship building in that way is a much more positive experience because it's less about like what I'm trying to get out of it and more of like, let's just like meet them where they are and try to understand. And I think too, like, one of the things that I've learned really quickly, and I think a lot of practitioners will resonate with them is like some internal stakeholders don't even know what we do. Right? So, let's take the time to also like educate them on like what it could mean to be, to have a social impact program or to be building that out, so that they can really understand like this is what it could look like, and then start sharing ideas that they might have on how that could, come together.
When you were doing that education piece and you had to go to an executive or another stakeholder that just didn't know what social impact was about or didn't understand how it adds value to the business, where did you start? Did you start from like where what their goals are and kind of work backwards in terms of kind of finding the connection piece?
Yeah, I think the way that I would go about it is trying to understand what their goals were, right? Because then it's a lot easier to say, oh, there's actually a lot of overlap, right? So a good example is thinking about, we have a team here at HubSpot that really manages like bringing our culture together. And for us, we are a hybrid by design company, which means that we have employees across 15 different countries, and they are either in the office sometimes, in the office all the times, or completely remote. And so how we form that like connection across employees is really important. And so we have teams that manage different employee engagement events and, ways for our employees to come together and meet up. And when I thought about that, I was like, what a perfect opportunity to bring volunteerism into the fold as a way to connect employees together and give them that sense of purpose, right? So it's like, I always try to explain it as like coming to the table with ideas that can be like, you know, kind of fit into the programs that they're already managing versus trying to like build out net new things. And of course, like we're always going to build out some net new programs, but I feel the more and more as we're building these programs with stakeholders and working with stakeholders, the more that we can try to inject ourselves into things that exist that are going to promote both of our end goals in the same way. That's how I've found those relationships and those conversations to be the most successful.
And before we move on, for those who may not be familiar with HubSpot, what is HubSpot?
Yes. So HubSpot is an AI powered customer platform, and our goal is really to help businesses grow better. And we do that through a whole different series of tools, such as engagement hubs. We do have a smart CRM, which is a customer relationship manager. That is what a lot of people think HubSpot is we just do customer relationship management. But we actually have a whole lot more, including this like really interesting and unique ecosystem. So within sort of the HubSpot ecosystem, we have different ways that you can integrate softwares or have templates for streamlining parts of your business. And then we also have like a really cool community network as well, because the idea is really to help power small and medium sized businesses with ways that they can kind of connect all their data, connect all their tools, and just make things easier for them.
I mentioned it when we first started the conversation, but HubSpot is one of my favorite companies. And when I was a marketer, I would always look to, what is HubSpot doing? Right? I even came away with like an acronym, WWHD. What would HubSpot do?
I love that. We should start using that.
No joke. That's anytime I had a marketing initiative or anything like that, I would look towards HubSpot and kind of see what your team is doing to see what's working. And so Now you're the social impact lead at HubSpot. Right now, what does your responsibility look like?
Yeah. So my responsibility is, I think of it almost in like three key buckets. Um, the first piece is thinking about our signature program, which I can speak a little bit more about, but that is really about like how do we take HubSpot's special sauce, right? Like using our product, our people, and using that for good, right? So that's sort of the first bucket is the signature program. It's called We Are All Entrepreneurs. We're sort of in the pilot tail end of the pilot phase right now. The second bucket is thinking about our employee volunteerism strategy. So, like I mentioned before, partnering with these different teams across the globe to really bring volunteerism to life, whether that's in office, whether that's remote, whether that's some sort of hybrid mix. And some part of that is also partnering with unique teams that will come to me and say, hey, we want to, embed some sort of volunteerism into a team offsite. And then the third part is thinking about our giving strategy. So, whether that's running employee matching campaigns, which we don't do a lot of, but we do have some sort of tailored strategies and campaigns there. And then also thinking about, beyond just, traditional giving, how can we think about our platform and, in-kind product and donations, which is an area that in the next year I'm going to be thinking a lot more about like our product and how we can actually like give that in a way that is, really beneficial for these sort of aspiring entrepreneurs.
Let's dig into the signature program a little bit more. I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah. So I mentioned this in the beginning, but when I started, I was on this listening tour and really trying to understand not only like what my stakeholders were looking for, but also, how can we make sure that the work that we're doing as a social impact team is tightly aligned to the business, right? And I said this or I mentioned this phrase before. I always think of it as like what is HubSpot's special sauce and how can we like use that for good? And when I first started, we had a social impact program, right? It was called HubSpot Helps, and it was really more of like a localized strategy where we had nonprofit partners across each of our geos or most of our geos, and we worked with them for volunteering, any sort of giving in kind. Uh, but as I was brought in, part of my role was to think about how can we like build something that will grow as the company grows, and how can we build something that will be like scalable and have like a real direct impact using our product and what we have as our best assets for good? So, the We Are All Entrepreneurs program, the main goal is to help early stage entrepreneurs who are from historically excluded groups or have been, come from backgrounds where they might not have had the same types of access to resources and opportunities, and to help them understand how they can leverage technology to scale their business. So, the HubSpot CRM is one great example of a technology that they could be using to scale their business. But the program also goes into other technologies, including things like Canva or, even the Google Suite, for example. Like it's really about technology as a whole and how it can help scale your business. So we did a pilot program partnering with an organization called Entrepreneurs for All, and they are based in the US. And the idea too was that, you know, Entrepreneurs for All, or E for All as they're called, they have this network of alumni who have gone through their program, right? Because they are a true accelerator or an incubator program. That is not what we intended to be. We are really trying to be that additive approach that's showing them how technology can be a key asset. Because I talked to a lot of nonprofits as I was building out this program, and more what they said is, we've got the incubator programs, we've got the accelerator programs. What these entrepreneurs now need is that next step to show them like how to take their business to the next level using tech. And I was like, well, that's perfect. That's something that we can absolutely be a resource for. And so in the pilot, E for All actually identified entrepreneurs that had been alumni to send through our program. So we had about 19 entrepreneurs go through our program, and it was, each week had a different topic based on, these sort of key moments in your business journey that you might need to bring in tech, whether that's, how you think about automation, how you think about email marketing and marketing in general, and then even starting to think about how you bring AI into your business early on when you're an early stage entrepreneur. And so the program itself had, four key components. We brought some self-paced learning. So we would give them homework each week where the entrepreneurs would have videos that were either curated by our team or they were in the HubSpot Academy, which is our sort of massive resource of all free learning content, right? So we tailored together different content based on what the topic was. We also had each week there was a live session. So we actually brought the entrepreneurs together virtually and had guest speakers who could talk to these specific topics. So, some of these were HubSpot customers, some of them were our solution partners, and they were really just experts in, whatever topic they were speaking about. And I think having that face to face and like real life example of like this is a person who's been in your shoes and they're now talking about how they got from point A to point B using technology. It really kind of helped them show, what this path could look like for these early stage entrepreneurs. And then the third bucket is mentorship. So we reached out to our sales team and our customer success team predominantly. We had some other folks from other teams, and we paired our entrepreneurs with folks from these teams to really give them that guidance and to give them that one-on-one support. And some of them talked about things in the HubSpot platform and wanted guidance there. Some of them just wanted more general, business support and building a business plan or something specific like email marketing. So it was really cool to kind of see those mentorship relationships build out. And then the last piece I'll mention about the program was just like building the sense of community for the entrepreneurs to learn from each other and, share with their mentors. So we did a bunch of like knowledge sharing and, during the live sessions, we'd have them, talk about their business and share, what they're working on right now. And I think having that sense of community was a really great way for others to learn from each other and continue to kind of like build on those blocks to get them to, growing their business a little bit more.
On the mentorship front, so you mentioned employees are involved on that side of things. Was it you reaching out to various employees to see if they want to get involved, or did you have kind of an internal, let's say, communication blast to everyone saying that, hey, we have this program. Is anybody interested in becoming a mentor? And then they kind of apply, if you will.
It was a little bit of both. The way our company is structured, we have a team that is like specifically focused on driving engagement for our sales team, for our flywheel. We call it our flywheel org. Um, and so I went to them first to kind of say, actually, first what we did is we went to sort of like the VP and we said, this is what we want to do. Do you think that this would be of interest, right? And the challenging thing is our sales teams are historically hard to engage because they're on quotas. And so it's hard to, get them to focus on things that aren't their day job, which makes sense, right? Like that is what they are trying to do and they have a hard deadline. But because we really tried to position this as a leadership opportunity as well. So we went to, the executive level to say, hey, do you think there would be interest in this? Here are the benefits that we see. And then from there, we got another contact that was more on, a director level. And they kind of identified, here are some teams and here are some guardrails that we should, mention when we're promoting this so that we are kind of we're promoting it in a way that feels like it's open to everybody, but it's also like you're going to be more, it's going to be more advantageous to you if you're in these stages of your career because you're also going to get something out of it, right? Like with employee engagement, you always have to think about the what's in it for me because that's just how human beings think. So once we sort of nailed down, like, here's like what you're going to get out of it as an employee mentor, we did some more specialized reach out to folks on like specific teams that we thought could be a good fit, but we also did like larger blasts as well to try and like, cast a wide net. And we actually got more mentors than we even needed, which was like a good problem to have for a pilot, right? And I think it gave us a lot of learnings in terms of like how we would do this in the future. But yeah, it was a really cool experience to see. And, it's a pilot. So there were some mentor relationships that definitely went better than others. But I think what really what really kind of showed me that this was a worthwhile venture was getting those individual mentors who reached out to me who said, hey, like I had such an incredible experience working with this person. Like, can I continue working with them? And my answer is always like, of course, right? Like, if you have the time and you have the bandwidth, please do. So, those are the mentors that I think we'll kind of double click into to understand, like, why did it work so well, right? Like, what were you able to bring to this entrepreneur to really make this a worthwhile experience? And as we continue to kind of grow and scale the program.
How did you settle on entrepreneurs being the focus of the program?
So entrepreneurship has always been a focus for HubSpot, right? Like when you think about what our business does, we are trying to help businesses grow better. So when we think about like how can we have a social impact program that relates to that, it makes sense that it's sort of these early stage entrepreneurs because, you know, one of the things that I always think about and talk about with this program and really with any social impact program is our goal is not to get customers into the HubSpot platform, right? Like that is not our end goal as a social impact practitioner. But that could be a nice long-term side effect of this type of program, right? So I think like by positioning it that way, it really we're able to get really strong buy-in from our leadership because we're going at it to say this is a program that is meant to help better entrepreneurs from backgrounds that wouldn't have that experience. If 5 years down the road, once they're ready for a CRM, they come to us, great. But our program is really about how we are giving them all the tools they need to understand the tech that they can, tap into and leverage. And I'll say too that like entrepreneurship has always been a really big focus for us, even outside of like the social impact team. We have so many amazing pockets of work that are happening across the business that are definitely more aimed at like that commercialization, like driving our customers and bringing in net new customers and whatnot. And so tapping into those like early entrepreneurs has always been something that we focused on. I mean, we have our HubSpot for Startups program, which is like, giving really incredible discounts to startup organizations on our platform to help them, be able to leverage it and use it as they grow. Right. So, I think in some ways it's really like entrepreneurship is just like innate to who we are as HubSpot. And it some companies, I think when you're trying to figure out like what should your social impact focus be, it's difficult because there's maybe not like that like clear line. For us, it's like it's pretty clear and it makes a lot of sense. And so it was almost an easy distinction. And I'll say too, like within entrepreneurs, like that's a big bucket. And so as we build out this program, we are all entrepreneurs, we have some plans to like test out different demographics, right? Like maybe we'll focus on student entrepreneurs or like young entrepreneurs. Maybe we'll focus on folks who are starting a side hustle and really want to turn it into their, long-term business. Or maybe we'll focus on women entrepreneurs who are doing this after they've been out of the workforce for a little while and want to re-enter into it in a different way. And so I think there's a lot of really unique ways that we can kind of support different demographics of entrepreneurs that still ties directly back into like our general mission as a company to help businesses grow better.
What I love about this program is the focus on relationship building. And you mentioned it, you know, further down the road, entrepreneurs that have gone through this program may never use HubSpot, but I suspect the vast majority will because you've already built a relationship and it gave them value. So because of that, it's an easy kind of ask on their end. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to use HubSpot. They give me so much value over my career and helped me build my business. Why wouldn't I at least try them out? And that's beneficial to the business overall.
Absolutely. Right. And I think that that's, when we were creating this program, again, like we really we initially I was like, okay, well maybe we'll want to have a program that is more of like an incubator and accelerator. And then the more and more conversations I had, the more I kind of came to that realization that like, no, our specialty, what we can really offer is our product and our people. And so how do we do that in a way where it's not a sales pitch. We're not selling them on HubSpot, but there is of course some HubSpot education and getting them familiarized with what that could look like. That's just part of the nature of these programs. But like you said, it's about introducing them to what a CRM could be and how it would work to work with a CRM. And down the road, if they choose to come to us, that's amazing. We hope that they do. But, we're really trying to give them all the tools they need so that when it comes time to make that decision, they'll feel like they can make an informed decision and hopefully come to HubSpot.
When it comes to creating a social impact strategy, how do you think about the work and integrating it into the business and aligning both together?
Yes, I mean, that's such an important piece. Aligning it to the business and embedding it into the business is something that I think we're going to see a lot more of, especially as we see these like really incredibly lean teams. So, there's a couple of things. I'll mention that I'm like a team of one on our social impact team, and we have a couple other folks on our broader sustainability team that manage, our greenhouse gas emissions, embedding sustainability into the business and like the environmental aspect, and then our governance as well. We operate across so many different teams that we leverage a lot of like champion programs. Um, so for example, like there's a program that's run by our, culture team, and those are champions that are really meant to promote culture across HubSpot. And so we partner with that team to help promote all things social impact and sustainability across the business, whether that's, using them to amplify messaging, whether that's, tapping into them to share their stories when we have different campaigns going on, and even thinking about like how we can, get them to continue to like do the volunteer events and do the sort of sustainable ask that we're putting in front of people. And, part of that is because it's this like built out champion network. But the other piece is like they are across so many different teams that you start to get that little trickle down effect too, right? Where they are bringing that to their broader teams, and then hopefully their teams are bringing it out to the people that they work with. So that's a little bit of like maybe not so much embedding and more just like how do we like leverage different folks across the business to have like a more widespread approach. Like when it comes to like embedding it across the business too, like when I think about like social impact, I think the fact that like we're building a program that is so tightly tied back to the business too makes a lot of sense, and it makes it easier for us to like really show the business value of this too. So when we're going to these stakeholders across our sales teams or, our customer success teams or, even like we have teams that are managing all of like our partners, for example, right? Like our HubSpot solution partners, when we're explaining what this program is to them, almost every single one of these folks is like, oh, that makes so much sense with what we're doing. Like, let's find ways to like overlap and connect. And so it just kind of like find ways to like dig itself deeper into the HubSpot soil, if you will, because there's so many other teams who have a vested interest in this, or they also have an idea on how to partner together. And that's been really cool about building out this program because there's been a lot of like really creative and innovative ways that we can like connect the dots across the business and across programs that already exist, which I think just helps to like further embed it into the business where it becomes something that like it just, it just makes sense. It just feels like that's how it is.
One thing I want to go back to really quick is when you first joined HubSpot and you mentioned you were going on those listening tours. How much, and I know social impact was a thing at HubSpot before you joined, but how much education did you need to do to kind of ensure that the wider employee base understood what social impact is at HubSpot and the value of it as a whole?
I think that in the beginning, we called it something different, right? We called it our HubSpot Helps program. And that was really like our sort of charity partner program that was focused on education and entrepreneurship. So it almost felt like coming in, it was a bit of a clean slate in terms of how do we want to define social impact, right? Because in my mind, our HubSpot Helps program was a part of that for sure. But there are other components that kind of make up what would be our true social impact strategy. So it was almost like cobbling together the different pieces to say, and that's why I like to ask that question of like, what does social impact mean to you? Right? Because some people were like, oh, it's just volunteering. And I'm like, sure, but like here are all the other pieces that are actually part of that. And that always like got the gears going because people were like, oh, well, we've done this and we've done that. And because we have such a distributed workforce, I have touch points with employees across every single country that we work in, and everybody had a little bit of a different definition of like what that meant. And in some ways that was fine, right? Like that was really cool to like understand what that looked like in their eyes. But then, I did sort of a restructure of, this is what social impact means at HubSpot. And I did a bit of a presentation to all of these different stakeholders to kind of re-educate them and remind them like, this is our strategy. This is how we're structuring it. Here are the things that I'm going to be focusing on. And then here are the things where I see, overlap for and opportunities for collaboration. So it was almost that two-pronged approach of like learning what it meant to them, parsing out like what social impact was at HubSpot at the time, and then understanding like, okay, well, how do we restructure that into something that we feel like we really can scale over time and still that, can align with our business and feel like something our employees will want to engage with.
And when you were presenting to employees, did you find yourself having to use, data, statistics, benchmarks, etc., anything, any insights from other companies to help make your case?
Yeah, so I am a big data fan, as we mentioned in the beginning when it came to my time working as a research assistant TA. I did a lot of benchmarking and research about what our competitors were doing. That was our competitors and our peers, right? To understand like where are we, right? Like that was another piece that I did when I first started is it was like where is HubSpot not only like from how our employees see it, but also in comparison to our peers and competitors. And that helped me really like right size the opportunity, and understand like I'm putting together this plan and I'm presenting this to you because of the data that I found from our competitor research, and also from research that I've done. I did a lot of data and research around like the metrics around like employee engagement and how volunteering and social impact and working for a company that prioritizes purpose can really lead to engagement, and how engagement, can lead to more productive employees, retention. We all sort of know the drill there, but I think like that wasn't always a dot that was connected for a lot of employees. And so kind of showing that to these external or these internal stakeholders, showing that data point of like, there is a real connection in having these programs and this engagement that we're looking to build as a hybrid company, as a dispersed company. And so that type of data was really valuable in kind of putting together that case.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. So we talked about your career, we talked about your time at Wayfair, and obviously your time at HubSpot. What I want to do is zoom out a little bit and just look at corporate impact as a whole. Obviously, the past year and a half or so, we've seen layoffs, we've seen companies, eliminate social impact entirely for a variety of different reasons. I would love to get your thoughts on where you feel like the profession is heading, and more specifically, where do you think this work will all be in the next, call it 5 to 7 years?
Yes, it's such a good question. And I I have sort of like three areas that I think about when I'm thinking about this question of like where are we going, and where will this profession be. I think the first is like I think we're going to see a shift more and more, if possible, more and more to these like lean teams, right? Like I'm a team of one working for a company with over 9,000 employees, right? So that means that we will really have to lean in heavily to those champions, to those folks who we can help embedded across the business. I think that is like that was never going to go away. I also think like we're going to see, and we've seen this already, like this shift between like I'd call it like traditional philanthropy, right, into this more like strategic social impact, right? Where, I think we're really trying to do that in building this program that aligns so tightly to our business. But I think like in a time where we are under a microscope, and we are, seeing a lot of geopolitical pressures and just a lot of change in general. It's going to become more and more and more important that the programs that we're building have that tight business alignment so that we can continue to show the value, like we've been talking about this entire time, right? So I think like that will be a continual shift in that direction. And then the other thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and I don't know, I can't say that this is something that I think will happen, but I'm going to say that I hope that this will happen, is I think there's a lot of opportunity for like cross sector collaboration. What I love about the social impact space, and I think any practitioner that you talk to will say this, is like we're pretty much open books, right? Like we're not really gatekeeping a secret, right? Like what are we gatekeeping? Like the secret of like how to do good better, right? So what I love, and like your podcast, Jeremy, does such a great job of this, is like knowledge sharing, right? And so I really think there's going to be a need and a time and a space for companies who are working on really similar programs and challenges and trying to like make change in similar ways to like come together and do that together and pool our resources to like have that collective impact. We don't do a lot of that as a corporation, like in corporate America right now. And I think that, like, as time goes on and as maybe we're more resource constrained, whether that's money, whether that's people, whether that's time, and like, unfortunately, as these issues continue to persist, like, we're going to have to find ways to come together and like really work collaboratively to like solve these challenges and come out of our silos. So I think that that's something that like I hope we see that shift because I think it's going to be really important.
I don't know why that doesn't happen more often. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because I was chatting with Ali Altaboni, who used to be the president of the eBay Foundation. She was on the podcast, about months ago. But we talked about that too. And for the life of me, I can't wrap my head around why cross-sector collaboration doesn't happen more often. I don't know if there is hesitation or there's hurdles. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of with you. It needs to happen.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think it's probably, if I had to guess, like hesitation just of sharing things that maybe aren't, they don't, that's not a natural thing, right? Like it's not natural for corporations to like share. I think in our space it's so unique where like we do a lot of that. And so it's almost like us as social impact practitioners have to show why that's important to our leadership so that we can make that case. Um, I also think too, there's like a little bit of, and this is maybe, a bit against corporate America, but there's a little bit of a, well, I created this, so it's ours. And, this is our program, right? Like, and we're all guilty of that. I'm just talking about how this is our program, but I think, getting out of that mindset a little bit and not caring that like it doesn't, that's actually not our goal, right? Like as social impact, that's not our goal. But I think sometimes it's easy to get in that headspace of, this is our program and we are this company and we are driving this. And so how do we kind of expand beyond that and kind of like shift the mindset? But mindset shifts are hard.
Very hard. Do you have an example? And let's say in an ideal world, let's say cross-sector collaboration is happening. What would a good collaboration look like?
Hmm, such a good question. I mean, I think about like our entrepreneurship program, right? And we are providing the education and the access to the platform and the experimentation with the platform and the people for these entrepreneurs, right? So like at the center of it, we have these early stage entrepreneurs, and we're one bucket of it. I think there's an opportunity for, other organizations like, and I'm sort of just like spitballing here, but like I'm thinking about like banks who might have loan programs for these entrepreneurs, right? That go beyond some of those like traditional incubators, right? Or maybe it's even, depending on what type of entrepreneur it is, like maybe we have someone who has like a true brick and mortar business, right? Like maybe it's, connecting with real estate companies to help them find those spaces and give them really good programs so that they can afford those spaces. Or, in the program that I was in the pilot program that we just ran, we had a lot of like online products that people were selling, right? So maybe it's things like partnering with companies like Etsy to like help promote these entrepreneurs on their platform as well, right? So I think there's like so many places where that cross collaboration can work. I think the way that you do it though is you have to kind of like look at the issue or the cause in the center, and then try to understand like what are all the spokes that can help this situation and this group of people, and then find the other businesses and the other organizations that are like all charging towards the same goal.
Do you have a collaboration in mind that you would want to do? Like, if you had the resources, you had the buy-in from the executive team.
You know, for some reason my initial thought, like my very gut reaction when you said that, was thinking about something with like a credit card company, because entrepreneurs are often like, selling things online, and there's always like that processing fee, right? That like they have to pay as the owners. And so my thought was like, those are some barriers to entry, right? Like that's a reason why like a lot of entrepreneurs are like struggling to, and I say this without knowing what programs like MasterCard and Visa have. I'm sure they have things like that. But, or even like the Stripes and the Squares and those types of companies, like that could be really cool because it's like taking the payment processing piece and, the platform piece and connecting the two together and like giving them ways to get paid easier, which then can help sort of that flywheel of like get paid easier, not have to necessarily pay the same processing fee, and then, reinvest that back into their business.
Well, hopefully that comes to fruition at some point in time. That would be fantastic to see. Okay, last question for you. And this is a new tradition on the podcast where I ask members of the social impact world community and my network if they had a question they would want to ask the guest. And so this question is more so on the nonprofit side. And many nonprofits obviously are looking to get in front of corporations for a variety of different reasons. From your where you sit in the business at HubSpot, what captures your attention when it comes to nonprofits reaching out to you and trying to get your attention and wanting to figure out a way to partner?
For me, it's really about knowing what HubSpot is and what we do and where that synergy exists, right? I think like I am 10 times out of 10 more likely to follow up with a nonprofit if it's clear that their business not only has alignment with what we're focused on, but they've started to like think through that and map it out, right? I get so many emails from these wonderful nonprofits, but some of them are so far from, where we are and what we would focus on. And so for me, it's really interesting when I get emails and outreach from nonprofits that show like they've done their research. They can really see what HubSpot does, and they have an idea of how we could benefit. That's maybe just beyond, sponsorship or funding. Like I and maybe this is just from working in like the startup space and the tech space, but like I really look for like those innovative ideas for partnership. Those are most interesting to me. And I think as a company that promotes entrepreneurship and innovation, like that stays true of our business as well. So I would say that it's kind of the idea of like I love to see nonprofits come to the table with these creative ideas for partnering that are really business aligned and show that they've kind of like they can see like how this could work, and like have sort of started to put that idea to paper, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Kaya, thank you so much for joining me and talking about your career and the work that you're doing at one of my favorite companies, HubSpot. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
This episode is brought to you by Social Impact World, the exclusive community for social impact leaders. To learn more, go to www.socialimpactworld.com. I'm Jeremy Brown, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Behind the Impact.